Okay, so to make sure that we've got good scoping, we need to start thinking about the organisations that we work for or work with, or even own, and we need to start taking reference to our own policies in the organisation. Okay, so we need to think about, what are the policies that we have in place, and how might that affect our activity. We need policies that are going to support it, and we need to make sure the activity is not cutting across them. We need to think about our legal obligations. Okay, so if we're changing anything in a business, we need to start thinking, even basic stuff like if I'm making modifications to my store or my place of work, is there a workplace health and safety concern that I have? What are the contracts I'm going to be entering into? Is there anything I need to order, supply, etc.? What could go on here legally that could create a ramification for me? I need to also go through my organisation, understand what are the known facts. Okay, so known facts relevant to the project and the stakeholders of the project. So what are we certain of? And also I need to make sure that I've really cleared the estimated time and budget. Okay, both of those, if you get those wrong, can have significant impacts across the rest of your business. I know for, even in my local area, we have a large Westfield shopping centre. And the large Westfield shopping centre right now is undergoing renovations. The problem is that it's actually not that far to the Christmas shopping crazy period, and the renovations are still in place. What that means is there's a lot of the shops boarded up, it's hard to get around, it's a real pain, and we're about to hit Christmas. So I can only take a guess that their estimated time has gone over, because they know full well that otherwise it's going to have a major impact to the stakeholders, the customers who are coming there are going to be really heavily affected. If all those people are really heavily affected, they might look at going somewhere else rather than go to that shopping centre. And what that'll do is that'll have a big impact on the takings for those people, all right? So, for the stores that operate there. So it can have a really massive impact. If your times blow out, you might miss key events, etc., that could have a massive impact further on in other areas of your business. Okay, if your budget goes over, well, you're going to need to find money from somewhere. And also, if your budget goes under, you might need to check and say, well, hang on, we planned on spending this much money, but we've only spent that much. Did we actually get what we paid for, or is something missing? Okay, so it creates other concerns. All right, so some of the things that can happen there, once we've sort of thought about those, is slippage can be a big one. Okay, and that's sort of what I covered by having the scope before. When we talk about scope slippage, we're talking about, unstated or conflicting aims. All of a sudden someone comes along and goes, well, actually, we've already decided on the scope, and then you start getting the actuallys. And in the actuallys is when you find out that, they were unstated. So we got, unstated, conflicting aims. Okay, so people might actually be looking for something totally different type of outcome, different objectives. Okay, what they said they want versus what they actually want. We could have, it could have been, scope slippage comes out of bad format. Okay, so when we actually laid it out, we haven't laid it out in a very, in a very useful manner. And what we started to find, there can be conflicting information in there, or it's poorly formatted, poorly presented, so people don't really understand what was going to happen. And what that does is that creates part of that slippage there, where we know what we were setting out to do, but we start to deviate and start to do other things that weren't really what we're supposed to be in there. Always have your stuff checked, okay? So, before you say this is the scope, make sure someone else checks it. Because the thing is, your scope could have been written over days and days or even weeks. And what you started out doing and what you finished doing, you started out with this idea in mind, but as you went along, you've made some changes and you haven't realized that that now conflicts with something else. Or you've said this is what we're starting as, but by the time you got to the end, you did all your different analysis, you had this other great idea. And what's happened is you've now got two ideas in the same document. Which one was it? Okay? And the other thing is when you're being vague. Okay, a scope is no place for vague language. If and but and maybe and it could and possibly. Okay, we don't use those. We do this is what is happening. This is what is not happening. Okay, it really needs to be, a scope can't be ambiguous. It needs to be absolutely very direct about what's in there. Okay, so it can't be vague. It needs to be very, very clear. It needs to be very, very detailed, very precise and very deliberate, okay? All those could, it would be nice, possibly, no. Okay, not in your scope. Okay, It can also start to slip because of that policy and procedure. If we haven't made sure that we're compliant with the organisational policies, all of a sudden we're going to be doing the project, and that's when things are going to come and hit us, and we're going to have to start to change on the fly. And when you're doing projects, having to change on the fly is not something you want. You don't want to be halfway through it and then realise you have to change something massive, because it can have all sorts of unintended consequences and create the opportunity for your project to fail. Enthusiasm is another one. Okay, over-enthusiasm, particularly when people they go into a project and they're supposed to achieve a certain goal, but they love the project so much they start trying to do everything. And they try and do everything all at once. Okay, nice idea, but you build a pyramid stone by stone. You don't just try and build a pyramid all at once. Probably not going to work. Okay, so they need to make sure that whilst we love their enthusiasm, slow it down and make sure you get it right. Okay, don't try and overdo things. Don't try and overcommit. Don't get into a position where you're trying to achieve everything at once, because if something goes wrong, it'll start to hit everything very quickly. At the same time, we don't want people to be overcautious. Okay, people that they get overly cautious. They don't really want to start or commit or actually put their name to it. So they faff around and sort of dance around things rather than go, this is what we need to do. Okay, so you've got to get rid of that over caution, where people don't want to move anything until they have every answer. The problem is we're aiming for a good scope. We're doing all the work we can to make sure we've got some great answers, but we need to be absolutely aware that there is no time we're going to have 100% of the answers. So what I find is that people are overcautious. They want to have all the answers, which they're never going to get, and they're going to keep waiting until they get all the answers they're never going to get, which means nothing happens. Okay, that people are often terrified of just making a decision, and that's the key part in business. Make a decision. Okay, you're a decision maker, you're a manager, make a decision. Okay, be a manager for a minute. All right, excellent. The other one that can get you is ignorance. Okay, once again, this is where the overcautious person comes in and goes, see, I told you so. Ignorance of risks, that'll stop us. We didn't know what the risks were. Yeah, well, we're not always going to know what every risk is. Okay, that's the hard reality. Things are going to come up we didn't expect, and that is when we start to manage. Okay, but we manage by having a really solid platform and really clear objectives so we know what we're trying to do, so that when something goes wrong, we can compare the two and go, right, what is going wrong? What does that mean? What have we got over here? What are we trying to achieve? And then we can do the math. Okay, if we know 1 and we know 1, we know the answer is 2. Okay, so we need to be really, really clear on what all those things were. All right, we don't want to be overcautious because then we'll never start. We don't want to be over-enthusiastic because we'll start everything at once. We don't want to be ignorant of risk, so make sure you're spending the time to obviously think through. And the other thing is, if you've really spoken to all your different stakeholders, most of these risks will be identified. Almost everything will come up. Okay, know your policies in the organizations you work for, making sure you're getting someone else to check your document to make, read this. Is it consistent? This is what we started to do. Read through, find any errors for me. Get someone else to have a read of it. Don't just read your own stuff, because you know what you meant and you'll just make up the gaps if you find them, rather than sort of go, actually, no, I need to deal with that. So you're formatting, make sure you've got very clear aims, very clear objectives, and that should get your scope pretty much together. All right, cool. What we need to do now is we're going to manage it, and we're going to make sure that the project remains committed only to the activities that we've agreed to, okay? So now that we've got that in place, we stick to it. The scope is pretty much chiseled in stone. However, you can change it and manage it, but it needs to be done by both the sponsor and the project manager sitting together very clearly and changing by agreement with due consideration to all the parts. Okay, no magic changes. All right, cool. And now we're going to talk about going on and moving forward. All right, cool.